Hello, this is going to be a short presentation on my contribution to the group project. My first contribution was the initial idea of a sort of Viking snake chase sequence that was based on the Indiana Jones chase sequence that we were given. So I started by breaking the scene down into its core components and then adapting that into a Viking snake scenario. It is also worth pointing out that I was the one who would make every slide for every week and then do most of the presenting. I also made a Discord channel for us to communicating with different channels for the various topics, such as the animatic, links to each week's PowerPoints, general chats, storyboard work showcases, and so on. Very early on, we established the props that she would need, and as I have some experience with hard surface modelling and texturing, I made a shield very early on. I did this using Maya and Substance Painter, as this is sort of an industry standard and also what I know best. Shield shape is pretty basic, but the wood panelling are individual panels, so this would help tiny bits of light go through and make a more realistic effect. Using Substance Painter, I was able to give the effect of wood with the grains and then paint that is slowly chipping on top of that, and also the Ouroboros symbol, which is meant to foreshadow the events of the giant snake later in the story. Was an image I found online, and then I used Photoshop to turn that into a alpha map that I could import to Substance Painter to paint out onto the shield. It's worth noting that very early on I was nominated the team leader. I think this is because it was my idea initially, the story, so I knew I had it in my mind what I wanted it to look like, so it was easy for me to convey and talk about. I also created a shot list. This was prior to me knowing that we'd be given a shot list to fill out. So before that, I ended up making my own, which included shot number, brief description, approximate duration of each shot, camera movement, any audio that we could think of, and the priority, as well as some notes. And this was all using drop down menus to make it easier for others to fill out, and also change later following our group discussions every week. Another thing I was responsible for was the mocap shoots. 3 of us attended, so I had to man the 3 computers, which was the Unreal and the Shogun, and I think it was called Take Recorder. I also had to retarget the Echo model before we turned up, so that took a while because it was all very new to me. Here in Unreal you can see all the takes we got. Well, these are the takes that I fixed because they required a lot of retargeting within Unreal afterwards to fix some weird hand and face stuff. Here are all the individual takes we got. So then obviously I was also responsible for putting this inside Unreal. Speaking of Unreal, that has been my main focus throughout this project. Everything in Unreal was solely done by me. That includes the blockout stage, the animations, the retargeting, the animation blending, manually adjusting the animations using an additive layer, importing new animations from Mixamo, and of course implementing the mocap data that we got. This is the character that we were given, the Echo rig. Ignore that helmet, that was an early prototype that I just haven't taken off yet. So another member of the team, Ryan, made the helmet and the sword. I made the shield, as I mentioned earlier. But something I was responsible for was actually binding the the assets such as a shield, helmet, sword, and then later on in the sequence, a torch and the fang, to sockets that I created for her. If I can find them here. Here we are. So yeah, this allowed me to easily attach the props so that she'd be holding them or they'd be attached to her during the animation sequences. Talk about our world for a bit. This took me a while. Everything you see here is basically a combination of Sketchfab and Quixel Bridge content that I've imported. I used a lot of Megascans. I think this is like sandstone and mossy sort of rocks that I've sort of like placed overlapping each other. And then the floor here I used like a nanite displacement landscape paint mode so that I could paint different areas of the landscape. So over here it's like this rocky grass, and then using the nanite displacement there's actual depth to it, so these rocks stick out a bit. But then if you go over here, there's like a little stone path with a bit more leaves on the floor due to the trees above. And then mostly here it's these like mud assets and sticks and stones sort of to break it up a bit. Also I added these footprints, which are like decals with a normal map that gives them quite a lot of depth so that the character could have something to track. To create a more realistic effect, I used a lot of lighting, such as like this directional light that simulates the sun with beams of light shining through the trees. These trees are also fab content with like a small amount of physics. I also used fog to make it a bit more spooky. Going on inside the cave, it does get quite dark to see here, so I used a sequencer, and that spawns in a lot of these lights where appropriate. So it's not a very realistic lighting in the cave, but if it was, it would just be pitch black once you drop the torch. So I used this sort of green lighting to make it a bit spooky. This is the main room. So as an entrance, the god ray here is not actually a hole, it's just a spotlight with an insane amount of intensity. Even with that really high intensity, the sword wasn't very visible in the sequence, so I used these rectangular lights to cast a stronger silhouette when the character's looking down from there. This is all again fab Quixel Megascans, and this is all the terrain here after I messed with the sort of tiling a bit to make it a bit less noticeable. Yeah, it's just a slight bit of depth with the landscape paint. What you see here is one of the many sequences that is in the Unreal project which I made. So these are all animated actors in one way or another, so these will be obviously cameras for the track. Spawnable objects, so this is when I wanted an object to only appear in this scene and then in the next shot it's not there. A lot of lights which I can change the intensity of depending on the shot, and obviously Echo herself with all her animation. Yep, lots of points here. So once I had finished a scene, so this scene 3 is her getting into this giant room, getting the sword and then running back out, I would put it into this master sequence and then I could assemble it ready for a render. So this meant I could leave it on like basically overnight and not having to keep render a sequence, come back, change to the next sequence, you know. One thing I was quite proud of myself with was the cinematography. So I tried to be quite creative with my shots. So that one right there, the camera is in one of these skulls in the eye socket, and then it starts focused on this bone, and then as she climbs, the camera draws focus to her, and then she's lit with this spotlight, then also some backlights to cast a stronger silhouette. See, lot of cameras here for various different shots. Each one of these shots, different lights will spawn in to light her better. I added camera shake to a lot of the cameras to varying degrees. I think this really helped with cinematography as well. So when the snake's moving or she's running, it feels a lot more dynamic and like there's weight to the movement because it's kind of rocking the ground a bit. This is one of my favourites, so it's focused on the skeleton, and then she runs past and the camera shakes more and more as, in theory, this giant snake approaches. Skeleton here actually didn't come with a pose or any texture, so I downloaded it from Fab. Then I auto-rigged it using Mixamo, so he would be posed. Then I took it inside Maya to remove the animation, smooth him out, because he's quite low poly, and then UV unwrap so that I could take it inside Substance Painter to add like a bone material and apply some dirt to some dust to make it blend more with the environment. I spent a long time playing around with camera settings to make it feel more realistic and a bit more interesting to look at. So this involved changing the camera movement, obviously the shake, the focal length, the focus and the exposure. I also added some film grain because I wanted to make it seem realistic, so it would behave like a realistic camera. And also the Indiana Jones reference that we were given had a lot of film grain because it was filmed quite a long time ago. Once everything was finished inside Unreal, I then rendered it out as an image sequence where I tried to strike a balance between render quality and render time. I ended up settling on just a 1080p PNG image sequence, but with 9 temporal anti-aliasing. I thought this was a pretty decent balance and still looks good in the final cut. To convert the image sequence into an actual video, I took it inside Premiere Pro, where I cut it up to rearrange the shots a bit and add new ones later on in the process, and then added some transitions, and as you can see here, obviously a lot of audio. I also ended up adding sort of the title sequence as well as the end credits with some various fading and music in the background. All of these sounds were just found on YouTube, and I edited the duration and added some echo to some of them. And most notably, I added some music from a game called Hellblade, which had a very similar sort of Viking theme. So this has been pretty much everything I've contributed to a group project. Thank you for listening.